With the best brand of football in Idaho, this is the 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
Well, hello and welcome in to a special on-the-road edition of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com. We are here to break down the great game of 8-man football in the great state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney. Let's bring in our 8-man expert. He runs the Idaho 8-Man X account. It's Will Hoenike. Will, what's going on?
It's a casual Thursday here. We're both kind of going low-key today.
Yeah, both on our T-shirts, looking good. So it's just going to be you and I tonight, Will. No coach. For the first time since he signed that contract to join the team.
Is he holding out? Is that what we have going on here?
Yeah. We didn't quite meet all his contract demands, so he's holding out. No, but Coach Lane Kirkland, for the first time, he had perfect attendance last year, was on our debut episode last week, but just didn't have a voice tonight. So he doesn't coach the high school football team anymore. He still coaches junior high football in Cary, and those junior high practices started up this week, and Coach Kirkland got a little boisterous, yelling at the boys, and then you combine that with the smoke from all the wildfires that are happening right up there in their backyard, and he just isn't in a good spot to talk. So we hope he heals up, and we're certainly thinking about everybody that's being affected by those wildfires as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that said, we are going to talk about the upcoming week 2 slate of 8-man football. Just about every single team in the 8-man game is competing this weekend, with the caveat being that because of all the smoke, it is pushed all the way out to the Treasure Valley. The Boise area has canceled a lot of games that were scheduled for tonight in terms of like soccer and 6A football. Obviously, the Magic Valley is being affected. And the winds could push it to East Idaho at a moment's notice, too. So the caveat is that some of these games might get postponed, may not happen because of the smoke, but we're not fortune tellers. We're recording this on Thursday night. So we're going to talk about the games like they're going to happen.
Yeah, and I've heard within the last 30 minutes, Brandon, I've heard that it's possible that the Mackey-Dietrich game could get flopped from Mackey to Dietrich. So don't change your travel plans yet, but because of the smoke, that apparently is on the table. It is possible that game could change locations.
Okay. Well, like I said, it's not like I have 5 million things to do already.
Right.
Going onto our site and changing all of these games is just another thing. You might be wondering, where the heck am I? Well, I am broadcasting.
You're in the bedroom.
Yes, I'm in my parents' spare bedroom here in Stevensville, Montana. I am on my way to Pocatello for the Rocky Mountain Rumble tomorrow. I'm going corporate this week, Will. I'm going to the big bad 6A, 5A schools.
Well, we put up with you. I've got the Parma hat on, so I'm talking big bad 3A on with them on my head.
Yeah, so I'm going corporate. Rocky Mountain Rumble is tomorrow. That is 8 hours from where I live now in North Idaho. So I was like, I'm just going to go to Montana. It's kind of not quite halfway, but pretty close. Break that trip up. And so, you get me on the road, and it is what it is. And so here we are rocking T-shirts, ready to break down the 8-man game. Hey, if you are watching live tonight on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, or X account, we want you to be a part of the conversation. You got a question for us? Throw it in the chat. A team you want to shout out, a player you want to shout out, throw it in the chat, and we will throw it up on the screen. This is what it's for. You, the 8-man fans, we want you to be a part of the conversation. All right, Will, we always start the 8-man Prepcast with our game of the week. We look back at what was the most exciting game in 8-man football. I don't know if you remember this, but last year, after the season opening week, our game of the week was Troy versus Deary. It was a game that came down to 2 points in overtime. Troy got the win. Well, this year, very similar result. Troy wins by 2, 24-22 over Deary. No overtime needed this time, but Troy did have a chance here, Deary had a chance. They threw up a Hail Mary as time expired, didn't complete it. So Troy starts the year 1-0. Deary, it's so many close games last year. There's another L in a game decided by a possession or less.
Yeah, that's a good win for Troy. You get Jaden Mason, the sophomore, has a hand in all 3 touchdowns for Troy. threw 2 touchdowns in the first half, moved out to wide receiver in the second half when Mekhi Direct came back into the game. And then Mason's on the receiving end of what wound up being the game-winning 49-yard touchdown pass pretty deep into the fourth quarter. And then, like you said, the defense able to hold on and keep Deary out of the end zone at the end. And Troy coming off a year where they struggled, and Deary coming into a year where they have some pretty high expectations. This was a good football game, and I don't know that it changes Deary's narrative at all. I still think that they're a team that could be playing deep into November, but they'd like their offense to be a little bit more potent, than it was. Nolan Hubbard had a hand in all three scores for Deary, and apparently I'm a little bit emotional about that.
You're really choked up about it. The thing with Troy, Mekhi Direct took most of, if not all of the snaps at quarterback last year for Troy. We talked about him on last week's show. He's a great athlete, fantastic baseball player for Troy as well. He actually did not start at quarterback in this game. Jaden Mason did. Mason throws 2 first-half touchdown passes to Jackson Marone. And then at halftime, they make the switch. Direct comes back in, and Mason catches a 49-yard touchdown. So we got 2 touchdowns passing, 1 touchdown receiving did Jaden Mason. That's why he got the nod for one of your Idaho 8-man 3-star ones this past week. You can always find those on the Idaho 8-man X account. And then a couple of days after that on IdahoSports.com. But yes, from this game, I think I'm encouraged by Troy, obviously.
Sure.
But Deary too. I think Deary is. I've changed my thinking a little bit in that 1A White Pine League, where coming into the season, I actually was really high on Timberline. I still am, but I think Deary's right up there too.
I think that whole league is going to be a dogfight this year. And I said it last week for those of you who watched. There are 4 teams in there, and this is where I will forever be questioning my choice of Deary making a deep run. And it's not a lack of faith in Deary at all. I think Deary has a chance to be a tremendous football team, but so does Timberline, and so does Genesee. You go down the list, all 4 of those teams, Lewis County. Every team has a chance to do something special in that league, and they're the any given Friday model there. 1 week Deary, you may think Deary, and the next week you may think, well, wait a minute, what about Genesee? And then maybe the next week, well, what about Lewis County? It's that league's going to be a bit of a knockdown drag out, and when you're talking about a wide open 1A, the former 1A Division II, the fact that these guys are going to have to grind every week, I think will pay dividends for them in late October/November. Is they're going to be used to slugging it out, and they're going to used to be playing games deep into the fourth quarter to get wins.
Yeah, that experience will pay off a lot for sure. So congratulations to Troy. They start the year 1-0, 24-22, the final over Deary in our 8-man game of the week. Hey, before we move on to the rest of the week 1 action, we want to let you know that the Idaho 8-man Prepcast is brought to you by Ideal, Idaho's college savings program. Ideal is a state-sponsored tax-advantaged savings plan that helps families pay for the cost of college. With the rising costs of college, developing a savings plan is the first and most important step in helping families finance a college education. You can find out more by going to idsaves.org, idsaves.org. That's Ideal, the Idaho College Savings Program. Well, Lapwai was saving up some of its points from last season, apparently, as we look at the rest of the White Pine League action from week 1. Lapwai hosting Genesee in a 2A versus 1A battle. Lapwai runs away with this 68-26. What was more surprising? Because we were high on Genesee. We said, Genesee's got numbers for the first time in a long time. They'll be very feisty in that 1A ranks. And then the other time, we said Lapwai, somebody has to finish in the bottom half of that very loaded 2A White Pine League. So what surprised you more? The amount of points that Lapwai scored or the margin of loss for Genesee?
I don't know that either of them surprised me tremendously. I mean, Lapwai pulled away. It was a ball game into, I think it was mid-third quarter, and that's when Lapwai kind of pulled away and wound up winning by 30 points. But Jerice McCormick, tremendous football game. Talked to Justin Podrabski, the head coach of Genesee, after the game. Talked to him over the weekend, and He basically said that young man's going to be a problem in that division in the 2A White Pine because he can sling it a bit, and they got some guys that can go catch it. It's typical Lapwai, you know what I mean? Never a shortage of athletes when you go to Lapwai. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. The other side of the coin with Genesee, I think that they are coming off a down year and moving down. And then the expansion of the roster this year, Podravsky said this is the biggest in terms of numbers team that he's had in Genesee. So I think they are probably going to be the textbook definition of the team that's not going to look the same about 4 weeks from now. Give them a few games under their belt. They made some big plays. They did some, Caden Brummer with 3 touchdowns. Clayton Holmes had a nice game running the football, had almost 200 yards rushing. So they've got some playmakers. They've got some talent. They've got to get some of those holes filled in. And I think that's the thing for Genesee that might take a couple weeks. And then as those players start to gain experience and gain confidence, they're going to be a tough team to handle in the 1A White Pine. And I think Lapwai, whether they finish high or whether they finish low, I think they're going to be a tough out in the 2A because they've got a good quarterback, because they have some athletes, because they can exploit some other teams with their athleticism.
I think Lapwai is in the mix for a top 5 finish in the White Pine League. And you might be saying, boy, that's really stepping out on a limb, 5 out of 8. But that it's a good league. And so you finish top 5, you're definitely knocking on the door of the postseason. Jerice McCormick, 5 touchdowns in this one. He had 4 passing scores, 1 rushing score. Marcisio Noriega caught 2 touchdowns. Julian Barros converted. He had 2 touchdown runs, also had a pick 6. Joseph Whitefoot had a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and a kick return touchdown.
That kid is versatile.
Yeah. It's like we forgot Lapwai had all these incredible athletes last year.
They always do. And it's, it's not so much you forget it's okay, who is it this year? We're so used to calling Elias Yearout's name. Well, he graduated and he's gone. Okay, next man up. And that's one of the things that's so impressive about them. And it's really evident in basketball where they're a dynasty. Case Wynot is gone. Who's going to step up on the basketball floor? But we see it on the football field as well. Is they've always got a couple of guys that put up huge years, and then they graduate, and then the next year it's like, okay, who's it going to be? And it always happens. They've always got tremendous athletes.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I'm keeping an eye on Lapwai for sure. And now as we get into week 2 of the season, Will, because there's 8 teams in the White Pine League, we dive right into league play. I mean, there are 3 White Pine games happening this weekend. One is actually happening tonight. It's going to kick off in about 10 minutes here. Clearwater Valley taking on Logos. Also this weekend, you have Lapwai at Kamei, Troy at Kendrick as well, and Kendrick's season debut and 2A debut. Which of those 3 games are you most intrigued in watching?
I think the most intriguing matchup is probably Lapwai Kamei based on what Lapwai did last week. And Kamei has some expectations, still having David Clute back for his senior year at quarterback and safety, and also the running back tandem. Can Jaden Crow and Everett Oatman, can they do what Connor Weddle and Colton O'Kane did last year? Can they replicate that kind of success? And if they are, Kamei is going to be a tough team to handle. And you got a team that wants to kind of grind it out on the ground and make you really work for it. And then you got Lapwai, which is just explosive play after explosive play after explosive play. I think that's going to be one of those games that we look back in about a month and we say, okay, that game is helping to shape the 2A White Pine standings and playoff prospectus a little bit.
Yeah, that's the game I would have circled as well. And so we did this, the IdahoSports.com pick 6, where our 6 prepcasters pick 6 games each week. We pick one from each classification. Our 2A game was Lapwai and Kamei this week. I did pick the Cubs, so we'll see if I prove to be prophetic.
Yes.
We'll see. Non-conference schedule this week for the White Pine League. This is going to be, there's some 2A, 1A crossover here, so we'll just kind of cover it all. Prairie gets their season started at Deary. But Deary with the tough, Troy last week, now Prairie this week. Salmon River makes the trip up to Genesee. Potlatch is at Timberline, and it is Council at Lewis County. Of those non-conference games, Will, give me one that you're most excited about.
I would probably lean towards the Council Lewis County game. Lewis County, because they have a lot of unknowns. The Lewiston Tribune caught up with head coach Monty Madrell this week, and he said, hey, I might have 3 or 4 freshmen starting. But then in that game, you might also have one of the marquee 1A one-on-one battles with Wade Vining at guard if he's playing guard for Council, and he lines up across from Trevor Knowlton, the defensive end for Lewis County. That's about as good as it gets in 1A 8-man football. Those two extremely talented football players going head-to-head on the offensive line like that. That could be a matchup worth watching. I think that's going to be a really, really interesting matchup. And Prairie Deary, obviously the return of Ryan Hasselstrom to the sideline. Dylan Hewlin caught the running back for Prairie. Another Shepherd at Salmon River as Blake Shepherd takes over at quarterback for the Savages this year. And then you mentioned the Potlatch Timberline game. Waylon and Jay Marshall for Potlatch, are they going to be able to step forward and carry this offense and keep Potlatch in that playoff race as well? There's a lot of good matchups, but I think the one that I'm most intrigued by is probably the Council Lewis County game.
Yeah, the White Pine League lost the best offensive lineman and defensive lineman last year, Porter Whipple of Cami. I really think on the offensive side of the ball, Jacob Keck from Potlatch could step into that role this year as the preeminent offensive lineman in the White Pine League. We'll have to wait and see. And then I'm kind of interested in Salmon River and Genesee, mostly because now Genesee's playing a 1A peer, and there's a little juice surrounding that Salmon River program. So I'm kind of intrigued to see what Coach Ty Medley is cooking with this year for the Savages.
Yeah, both of them have a little bit of juice around them. Both of them have a little bit, they've been smaller rosters in the past. Both of them are pretty excited because they've got enough kids, and this sounds dumb, but go with me. They have enough kids to practice 8-on-8. They have enough kids where you don't just leave the same 8 players on the field the entire football game. You can sub in, you can sub out, and both teams feel like they've got a chance to, and rightly so, they feel like they have a chance to control their destiny and maybe go earn a playoff berth.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, well, I think the big game that was on everybody's radar heading into last week was Butte County and Logos. Will, you were there for that game. We will get a report of what you saw live with your own eyes right after this word from Ideal, Idaho's college savings program. You're watching the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
This year, help dreams come true with the Ideal Idaho 529 Education Savings Program. Our easy-to-use tools make it simple to plan for your child's education. With tax benefits, ownership flexibility, Ideal is the perfect way to save for college, trade school, K-12 education, and student loan repayment. Join us at our next webinar to learn more about the 529 plan. Enrolling takes just 15 minutes, and you can start with just $25. Visit idsaves.org if you would like to learn more.
Welcome back to the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Brandon Baney with Will Hoenike. Apologize for the audio on the road. Next week, I'll be nestled back into my home studio and back away from the road. But for now, let's talk about what was the biggest matchup on paper going into week 1 of the 8-man season. Butte County versus Logos. It was our inaugural Gem State game of the week on IdahoSports.com. That's something new we're doing this year. We're 1 game each week, except this week. It's the Rocky Mountain Rumble, and there's 7 games. But it'll be 1 game each week where we really up the production value, multiple cameras, enhanced graphics. We had a lot of good feedback from our very first Gem State game of the week. It was Logos and Butte County meeting at a neutral site in Homedale. Will, you were there as part of the broadcast. Logos got up 2 scores early. Yes. And that's when I was watching, and I was like, oh boy, Logos looks pretty good. And then I'll admit I didn't get to watch the second half. I came back and saw the final score, and I was like, Butte County came back and won 36-24. Well, what happened?
It was a really good football game. And you had you talked about Logos, the fast start. They first drive of the game, they drive down the field and they score. Really effective, really efficient drive. And then they make a red zone stop on defense, and they turn around and they march it back down the field again. And just like that, it's 16-0. And we talked about on the broadcast, myself and Logan, we talked about on the broadcast that Butte County was in a little bit of danger zone. They could have found themselves in deep trouble really fast. And it was 16-0 at one point. At another point, it was 24-6. But then Butte County, like veteran teams do, they just stayed the course. Head coach Sam Thorngren after the game said he was really excited how calm his team stayed in the face of some adversity. And then in the second half, I just think the running combination of Razor Duke and Ross and Twitchell, I think they just wore Logos down a little bit. There were some longer time-consuming drives where when Logos needed that big stop, they weren't quite able to get it. And then Butte hit a couple of home runs. There was an 89-yard touchdown run from Razor Duke and an 81-yard touchdown run from Ross and Twitchell. And they came back and they were able to get it done. But it was a good football game. And, I know there were a lot of eyes on the game. I know there were coaches in the stands. Valley's coaching staff came up. They had some people there watching. I know Zane Hobart from Kendrick was tuned in, watching a little bit, just kind of peeking in to see what's going on. And it's not very often, just to show you the respect that Logos earned in the loss. It's not very often that an unranked team loses its opening game and gains vote in the poll, as they went from unranked to ranked number 5 in the 2A. And I think that was a reflection of how they played. Seamus Wilson replacing Jack Driscoll at quarterback. I thought he did some good things. He'll get much better as the year goes on. And I really like their linebacker duo, Ben Carlson and Gunnar Holloway. That's a really good two-man linebacker group that, if that defensive line is just able to occupy blocks and then let those two linebackers go get the ball, Logos is going to have some success on defense.
Yeah, I think the heartbeat of that team is Gunnar Holloway. He's the center on offense, the middle linebacker on defense. He's the son of head coach Nick Holloway, just the consummate leader. And yeah, I think both teams can walk away from this thing going, okay, there's definitely some things we could do better, but at the same time, we both competed really well. And yes. I see Butte County kind of being like a boxer this year, where it's going to be Duke for 4 and Twitchell for 5 and Twitchell for 4, and then all of a sudden, boom, the knockout punch comes with a big play like you alluded to.
And that's what happened a lot in the second half. I thought in the first half, Logos's defense did really good. They did a really nice job bottling up those runs, especially inside. If Butte County early in the game, if it felt like if they were getting anything, it was around the edges. And that, you don't want to live and die on sweep plays. You know what I mean? And then in that second half, they were able to just kind of wear Logos down a little bit. And it wasn't a hot day. It wasn't a super muggy day. It wasn't a super sunny day, but it was the first game. And there was some cramping. There were some kids that got tired. I thought both teams played incredibly hard. It was a fun football game. And I think my favorite moment at the end of the game came in the post-game interview. Our player of the game was Razor Duke. And Lucas Gebhardt was interviewing him on the field after the game. And Lucas said, I was listening as you guys were going through the handshake line, and I heard a lot of can't wait to see you again in the playoffs. And he asked Razor Duke, you excited to see these guys again in the playoffs? And Razor, without really hesitating, says, nope. He's like, those linebackers can hit. I don't know that I'm looking forward to that again. So I think a lot of respect between those two teams. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Win or lose, I think both teams were going to walk away saying, okay, we got something we can work with here. Yeah,
it was an exciting game for sure.
Yes.
Let's talk about Butte County's counterpart over there in the High Desert Conference, Grace. They hosted Oakley on Friday night on IdahoSports.com, 50-8. The final. Grace dominates. Gavin Draper was a maestro out there. He was dissecting that defense left and right through 4 touchdown passes. All right, big picture here. Did we overrate Oakley? Did we underrate Grace? Where do you fall on this paradigm?
I don't know yet. And part of that is because Oakley played without a couple of key players. So I don't know that it was a completely apples to apples thing, but I think we knew Grace was a good team. The one thing I was really impressed with is when Gavin Draper had a receiver open, he didn't miss him. And it sounds like a very obvious thing to say, but there are times if you go to high school football games where you're watching a receiver running wide open across the middle and the ball hits him in the ankles or it sails over his head or whatever it is. But Draper, for the most part, I thought was on the money. And then when they needed to make a big play, they did. And what specifically comes to mind is I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the score was 14-8. Grace led, and it was late in the first half, getting late in the first half. And Oakley hit a big play where they dumped it off to Dallin Hardy, their offensive lineman / tight end, and he just cut it loose. And it was about a 50, 60-yard gain, and he gets tracked down inside the 20 and gets pulled down, and right before his knee hits the ground, the ball comes loose. And Grace recovers it, and then Grace proceeds to take it the other way in the 90 seconds or whatever before the half expires. And this is the Gavin Draper thing. He hit a couple throws, and they move down the field and score. And who knows, in that game of what if, okay, let's say the officials rule Hardy down and that fumble never happened. And all of a sudden, with a minute and a half to go, Prairie's on the 10, 15-yard line with a chance to take the lead going into the half, okay? Well, the officials called it a fumble, okay? So now it's Grace football. They go back the other way and score. That's a big swing from potentially being ahead at the half to being down 20 to 8, and then Grace just took over in the second half, and they looked really good. I was really impressed. Oakley's going to need a little bit more on offense, and I think they'll get there. They had a hard time establishing the run consistently. I think that had a little more to do with Grace than it did Oakley. But Oakley, I think, they're going to need to get healthy, and they're going to need to be a little bit more consistent on offense.
Yeah, and Grace has incredible balance. I mean, there's going to be games where Draper and the passing game kind of leads it. There's going to be games, and we saw this last year, where they lean on Braden Kimball. He runs the ball incredibly well. And so I think Grace
played wide receiver a lot. I don't know, because I know you were doing your own stuff. I don't know how much you got to watch that game, but Kimball played a lot of receiver, and they had Chase Smith in the backfield, and he was effective. You know, he was your almost stereotypical between the guards fullback. And as that game went on, you know, that push from the Grace line and those holes getting opened up just kept getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And the 4-yard runs turned into 8-yard runs, turned into 15-yard runs, and he was incredibly effective.
And I guess that's encouraging to me, because that was the one question we had about Grace, is they did lose both of the Clegg boys up front. How was that line going to look? But if they were pushing around Oakley, I mean, Oakley's tough. So I think Grace is a Final Four team. Grace is a team that could play for the championship. Grace is a team that could win the championship. I felt that the last couple of years, definitely this year too.
I wasn't too sure going in. I mean, I knew they were a good team, but it's like, okay, how good? And that's why I like to see a couple of games, because I don't want to just unilaterally, and I mean, I know that we do it for fun, but, I really like this Butte County team that we saw. I think that they have a chance to play deep into the playoffs and compete for a championship. Wasn't really sure about Grace or Oakley. They both were having to replace some important pieces, some really valuable players and some really talented players. And based on what we saw Friday, Grace looks better prepared moving forward to do what you're saying. That doesn't mean Oakley's dead in the water. It doesn't mean write it off, let's just put in all the freshmen and call it a rebuilding season. That's not what it means at all. It just means that right now, as we stand here at the end of August, Grace is probably a step ahead of Oakley, and I think that got proven on the football field.
So Oakley was the only team from District 4, that Snake River Conference, that played last week. So we'll kind of, as we look at the schedule this week, we'll go Districts 4, 5, and 6, because there's crossover with everybody. Butte County is hosting Valley. That's why the Valley coaching staff was at the game you were at, scouting up the Pirates. Grace is at Raft River. That game, if you want to see more of Grace, Will, you can tune into that game on IdahoSports.com. That's our Magic Valley game night. So Grace at Raft River. Cary is at Murtaugh. Glens Ferry is at Rimrock. And Chalice is at Hagerman. Okay, so we've talked about Valley, Butte County, Grace, Raft River. Between Cary, Murtaugh, Glens Ferry, Rimrock, Chalice, Hagerman, which game you keeping an eye on?
I think Cary, Murtaugh. I want to see Murtaugh in action, and I mean, I know that it's not ESPN. There aren't going to be 800 games on where you can just flip around and see whatever student-led broadcast of every single game every single week. And Idaho Sports is doing fewer games this year, focusing on the game of the week, which I love. We can talk about that more. But Murtaugh, you lose Oscar Roberto. You lose Junior Benitez. You lose some other key seniors off that team. You have a new coach. what are they going to look like this year? I still think that there's plenty of talent on that team. Sawyer Young at quarterback, Brody Funk, the running back, I think is a good player who didn't get as much run last year because of the seniors ahead of him. I think that they're a very intriguing team in the 2A classification this year, not just in District 4, but period. I think they're a very interesting team. How good can they be? And then Cary dropping back down. They should have a good defense. They've got an experienced quarterback. They've got some nice pieces returning for their senior year as well. So that's a team that I think most people expect to do well in the 1A classification. We think Murtaugh can do well in the 2A classification. We expect Cary to do well in the 1A classification. They were conference rivals last year. How do they look going against each other? I think that that's really an intriguing contest.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the North Star League. 1A football up north in District 1. We had a conference game right out of the gates, Will. This was the game I was at last Friday night. Yep. As Lakeside took on Coeur de Christ. It was a home game for Coeur de Christ at the Mariman Health Core Center in Worley. You said it, a little fun trivia question. The first points in Coeur de Christ history came on a safety. Bad snap. Tyson Charlie, who is the Lakeside punter, and he's a tall guy, 6'2", 6'3". That snap went way over his head. There was no chance he was getting it out of the back of the end zone for 2 points. The actual first individual to score a touchdown for Coeur de Christ was John Denke, the sophomore running back, who I thought ran the ball incredibly well. He's definitely a guy you're going to want to keep an eye on as the season goes along. But ultimately, Lakeside, a little bigger, a little faster, a little stronger, a little more experienced. 54-32 win for the Knights. Tyson Charlie, 7 touchdowns in the win. He had 4 passing touchdowns, all 4 to Jamari Pion, and then 3 rushing touchdowns as well. Lakeside looks pretty legit. I mean, one game in. I don't want to overreact, Will, but, man, Lakeside looked good to me playing in very sloppy conditions. It was a downpour. It was rainy. It was windy. And despite that, they ran the ball down Coeur de Christ's throats when they needed to. And then Charlie actually hit on some pretty good throws. He threw a couple of fades into the corner of the end zone to Jamari Pion that were pretty impressive.
That was the thing. You mentioned the weather. Watching you and Ryan Skaggs on the broadcast and listening to you guys chuckle as you're literally trying to hold on to your pop-up tent there so it doesn't blow away in the middle of the broadcast. But you hit the nail on the head. You're talking about a kid in Tyson Charlie, fantastic basketball player, trying his hand at football for, I believe you said, the first time ever, or at least the first time in high school.
Yeah, so he might have played as a freshman, but he definitely hasn't played the middle 2 years because of injuries and things. So okay. It's been a minute.
And I thought he looked good. Like, he was very good athletically. And you mentioned the touchdowns that counted. He also had a couple called back, including another one on a high snap that he had to chase down and then wound up running. What did you say, about 95 yards for a touchdown? So
99. He ran from the end zone to the other end zone.
I wouldn't make it. I'd have to stop at about both 35s and take a little time out there. But I thought he was really impressive. And in a league that, we can have a longer conversation. You're talking about 4 teams in the North Star. All 4 have really young, talented, exciting quarterbacks. And I think we're both on the same page that Wallace might be, at this point, the team that you're going to have your eye on is, okay, that might be the team to beat the North Star this year. I think Lakeside staked a claim and said, hey, don't forget about us. We got a pretty good team too. I'm with you. It's tough to grade too much based on the conditions, but I thought both teams put on a pretty good show.
Yeah, the one thing Lakeside's got to clean up are the penalties. They had, 6 or 7 illegal crackback blocks. I mean, just the same play over and over and over again. I'm sure Coach Jerry Louis McGee will get that cleaned up. Had a chance to talk at halftime with Patrick Young, the head coach of Clark Fork. The Wampus Cats had the week off. He was down there scouting up the competition because Clark Fork opens with Lakeside in Clark Fork Friday night. So that'll be an interesting game for sure. Clark Fork is very low numbers this year, and so we will see how they can compete. They've got a young sophomore quarterback, Mateo Cruz. So all of the signal callers in this league are underclassmen. Grant Clemens, freshman at Coeur de Christ. Mateo Cruz, sophomore at Clark Fork. You've got Cooper Miller, the freshman at Wallace. And then Tyson Charlie's the old dog. He's junior at Lakeside. And then let's talk about Wallace. They hosted Timberline of Weehype. They get the win 32-12. Will, they scored, I believe, 28 or 26 of the 32 points, all in an 8-minute span there between second and third quarters. Otherwise, it was pretty even.
It was a fairly even football game, except for that little burst that you mentioned. And you talked about Cooper Miller, the freshman quarterback for a first varsity start. And he's not your stereotypical freshman quarterback. You're talking about a young man he's gone to camps at Montana Tech, team camps at Montana Tech. He played in the Idaho Bowl this summer with kids from 5A and 6A, going into 5A and 6A programs. So he's got a little bit more seasoning and a little bit more experience than your garden variety North Star ninth grader. But he did a really nice job. He had a hand in, if I'm not mistaken, all four touchdowns, I should say. He ran into and then he threw 2 to Julian Davis, which it really helps your confidence level if you're a freshman quarterback when you got Julian Davis that you can just say, hey, go, I'm going to throw it up and you go get it. He's one of the better. I think Julian Davis is one of the better, one of the most versatile weapons in the 1A classification, not just the North Star. I would expand it out potentially to the entire 1A classification. And that's why I think a lot of people like Wallace. You got a good young quarterback. You got a really talented weapon on the outside, and you got quite a bit of experience coming back for the Miners. I think they're a team that could definitely make some noise. But Timberline, they've got a little bigger roster. They're another team that grew a little bit roster wise this year, but replacing guys like Rylan West, that's going to be a challenge. That guy was so good. I mean, he was. A lot of people may not have known his name, but he was so good. And replacing him, Aries Maberly was one of them who chipped in and picked up a touchdown for Timberline. So they'll grow, they'll get better, they'll compete in that 1A White Pine League as well. But Wallace, I thought, looked really, really good.
Yeah, here's Wallace Miners Athletics in the chat, Will. Hashtag Juju. Julian Davis.
I thought it was Smith Schuster. I thought they were big. Like, who does he play for now? The Chiefs?
I think he got cut. I think he's unemployed.
Oh, unemployed. Well, come on out to the Wallace Miners game. If you're watching Juju Smith Schuster, I'm sure they'll let you down on the sideline, give you a T-shirt, make a big day out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Wallace plays Coeur de Christ this week in Worley. Lakeside hosts Clark Fork. So everybody's playing each other in league play here. Lakeside a chance to go to 2-0. With a win over Clark Fork, that would be a huge start for the Knights for sure. And Wallace, a chance to go to 2-0, 1-0 in North Star play. Okay, that wraps up all the action from a light week 1 schedule, Will, which means we can just kind of preview the rest of the landscape in terms of what's coming up here. We haven't talked much about the Treasure Valley yet, District 3, either 2A's Western Idaho Conference or the 1A Longpin Conference. We did mention Salmon River just kind of briefly, but here's the schedule of games. It's a lot of crossover, 2A versus 1A. You've got the Gem State Centennial Baptist Co-op playing Cascade. I'm assuming that game is tonight as we're recording this.
Well, at Cascade, it might even be over by now.
That's true. They play on Thursdays because of Gem State Adventist Academy. Idaho City is at Garden Valley. Notice is at Tri-Valley, and Horseshoe Bend is at Wilder. What's the most intriguing matchup?
Probably Notice Tri-Valley, because Notice has been the 1,000-pound gorilla in the Western Idaho Conference for a while, and they look like they have another pretty good team this year. Ian Hill, Gunnar Campbell in the backfield with Benny Guevara. They should be a pretty good team again. And then Tri-Valley is a team that is not super deep. They don't have, a humongous bevy of players, but the kids they have are good. And in talking to a coach who saw them in action at a team camp over the summer, he said they were easily one of the best teams at the team camp up at Eastern Oregon University. So that's saying something right there. And Jace Wagner, the junior quarterback, 21 touchdowns last year as a sophomore. So you got a nice trigger man there, an experienced player who can make some things happen. They do have to replace a lot of bruiser yards in Gage Warren, and they got to replace a lot of speed, explosive yards in Clayton Harper. So how those roles fill will probably tell how far Tri-Valley goes. But the Titans should be a good competitive football team. Notice should be a good competitive football team. It's a good opening matchup for both teams.
Yeah. And the game I'm looking at is Idaho City at Garden Valley, because each of these teams finished in second place in their respective leagues a season ago. Garden Valley, we think, is going to be pretty good this year. Idaho City, I actually have optimism for. I think a lot of people have said, well,
you say that like it's a surprise.
Well, I think the thinking from a lot of people is that the Western Idaho Conference has gotten 2 playoff teams the last couple of years only because there were 2 predetermined slots from that league available, and that's the only reason Idaho City got in. I'm not sure about that. I think this year Idaho City could earn a playoff spot on its own merits, and I think they're going to be in it competing right up until the last week of the regular season. So,
yeah, we talk about every team this time of year. We talk about the players they lost and who steps forward. For Idaho City, a guy that could be a person to take on a larger role would be a guy, Charlie Culver. Is he a guy? Is he a running back? Is he a quarterback? Is he a receiver? Is he all the above? Jason Rober, an experienced head coach, a really smart head coach. He does a good job with the players he has, like moving the pieces around a little bit on the chessboard. He'll do that with this team, and he'll maximize their potential. The one thing is, I don't know an 8-man football of another team that mirrors its coach and its coach's identity quite the same way as Idaho City. When you're talking about, they are just a line it up, grind it out. They're not super flashy. They're not super overstated. They're just going to go play football. They're just going to go play hard football, and they're going to make you work. And that's Jason Rober. If you've ever met Jason, great guy. He's one of my favorites, but he's a very understated guy. Hey, let's just go play. Let's not worry about everything else. Let's just go play. And you can see that reflected in the way his team plays.
And they have quite the home field advantage. Idaho City's not an easy place to get to. So, right. Yeah. For sure.
I do wonder, and I assume the answer is yes, that there's a back way to get from Garden Valley to Idaho City instead of Garden Valley coming all the way down to Boise and then going back up. I've just never made that drive before, so I don't know what it would be, but I assume, because I don't think they're separated by that many miles. It's just that they're both north of Boise, one northwest and the other northeast. So I'm curious what the exact route would be. If anybody paying attention knows, let me know. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, drop it in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then let's wrap up with districts 4, 5, and 6. Again, we're getting some crossover here. For the moment, Rockland at Camas County, Castle Ford at North Gem, Water Springs at Hanson, Dietrich at Mackey. Well, it sounds like maybe that's going to get flip-flopped. Mackey's going to get Dietrich. And then Shoshone is going to open with the Hagerman JVs. So taking the 4 varsity contests, and we should mention, I only discovered it this week, Clark County up in Du Bois, rather than going with a 6-man JV schedule against the other teams in their conference, they decided to just co-op with Water Springs. This is something they did a couple of years ago. And so Water Springs says, we'll take it, even if it's only 3 or 4 or 5 kids from Clark County.
Every little bit helps.
No doubt. So of those 4 games, Rockland, Camas County, Castle Ford, North Gem, Water Springs, Hanson, Dietrich, Mackey. Which one are you most excited for?
Rockland, Camas County, which if it happens, my daughter and I, we're going to go up there and we're going to watch it, an afternoon game in what is supposed to be a sunny afternoon. If the fires cooperate and the air quality cooperates and allows that game to happen up in Fairfield, you're talking about 2 teams that were playoff teams a year ago that both lost a lot, and who is better equipped to replace the losses, I think, is the ultimate deciding factor in this game. And, Camas County, I want to say it was a 7-player senior class, and you're talking about Troy Smith, Tristan Smith, Emmett Palin. You just go down the list, and they had a lot of those kids who would play a pretty fair amount of time because Camas played a lot of blowout games last year. But are they ready to step up into the main seat, so to speak? Are they ready to do that? And then on Rockland's side, the last 2 years, it's been the Teague Matthews show, because in a town the size of Rockland, how often do you get an NCAA Division I level of athlete? And that's what they had, and they were able to lean on him and run everything through him. Well, now he's gone. They've got a couple of really talented receivers. They've got some nice pieces. Head coach Jerry Hunter says, hey, we're still going to throw the ball. We like the pieces we have. And again, are they ready to ascend into a bit of a little bit of a starring role, instead of being able to, be their team's version of Robin to whoever Batman would be, whether it was Troy Smith or whether it was Teague Matthews. So I think that's the storyline in that game. Is, I think both teams have expectations. Both teams have goals, obviously, and whose team's secondary players are ready to step up into primary big-time roles.
Yeah. The game I'm most intrigued by is Dietrich and Mackey for this reason. The media poll has come out the first 2 weeks. Dietrich has been the number one team in that 1A poll. When I vote in the media poll, I always defer to the coaches early on. We poll all the coaches and ask them, in your conference, how do you see it shaking out? Kerry actually won our preseason coaches poll. Now, Coach Kirkland says he had nothing to do with that. I'll take him at his word, I guess. But to me, then, if Dietrich's going to come out and be the number one team in the media poll, okay, let's see it. You not only have to win, you've got to win convincingly. I feel like there's a lot of undue pressure that's been put on Dietrich because of my media comrades thrusting them into the number one spot. I think Dietrich's going to be very good this year. I don't know that I was ready to give them the number one slot out of the gates, but that's fine. I just want to see what Dietrich looks like.
Yeah, and in a preseason poll, somebody has to be number one, and if not Dietrich, then who? And I think that's the question, and I think that's what's fun about this year's 1A is from all the way up north to all the way down south. You got probably 6-8 teams that legitimately feel like, hey, we could be that number one team. And I think you're right. I think Dietrich has some really talented players. Head coach Garrett Estelle, he's somebody who knows that tradition. He knows Dietrich's what they do, and he knows how they do it. So they're going to be a really entertaining team. And Mackey, that was a playoff team a year ago. Taylor Rogers coming from the defensive end, he's going to be a menace for Connor Perkins to have to deal with. He's going to have to know where Rogers is, and Rogers is a tall, lanky pass rusher, so it's not like he's going to have a hard time spotting him. But that's, can Rogers get to Perkins a time or two, and can he disrupt the pocket, and can he make Perkins maybe make a decision a little bit faster than he wants to? I think that could be something that could be a big key in the game if Mackey wants to pull, I guess, what you'd call an upset by winning that football game.
It'll be a lot of fun for sure. It is a fully loaded schedule of 8-man games. And again, that's weather permitting in terms of smoke and air quality and all of that. So we hope everybody gets to play tomorrow. But mostly, we hope that everybody stays safe out there. Again, those that are right up against those wildfires there in Stanley, we're thinking about you and keeping you in our thoughts and prayers, certainly. So best of luck to everybody competing this weekend as well. Will, if that Camas County Rockland game happens, enjoy it. I'm excited to get a scouting report. So,
I'm very excited. I went to Fairfield a few times back in my TV days when I worked for Channel 6, and we used to look for an afternoon game to just go get an extra football game, like Cascade, Garden Valley, Fairfield. There was Jordan Valley when Jordan Valley, Oregon had their own team. Sometimes we would go get them. And I haven't been to Fairfield for a football game since then, but I used to enjoy going up there and watching games there. So I'm excited to get back and hopefully get a chance to see the Mushers and the Bulldogs.
For sure. I think I showed this on the Magic Valley Prepcast. That's our District 4 specific Prepcast. But Camas County got kind of a new logo. They kind of combined. They've been rolling with a couple of different logos these past couple of years, Will, and they kind of merged them together. That's cool. That's pretty boss.
Not bad. Not bad. That'd make a good T-shirt.
Yeah, that's cool. So that's what Camas County is rolling with this year. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast. It is Labor Day weekend, And once Labor Day weekend rolls past, the sprint to the presidential race always happens. Here's Wallace. Hashtag Baney for Prez. I love it.
It's what happens when you host the show. You always get the dap. You always get the love.
That's right. I drove right past Wallace today as I was making my way over to Missoula.
Did you honk and wave?
I did. Well, it was a lot of road construction, actually, so I was just focused on the car.
Is there ever not road construction there?
Right.
I mean, I grew up there, and I think there was road construction going on in that stretch of I-90 when I was growing up.
Yeah, perpetually. So enjoy the competition this week, everybody. Enjoy the 8-man game we're bringing to you Friday night. Grace at Raft River. And we'll see you back here next week, next Thursday night, 7:30 for another edition of the Idaho 8-man Prepcast. For Will Hoenike and the coach Lane Kirkland, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on Idaho Sports.